There had better be a better answer to this sentiment in these various polities than you are racist, because loving my country and wanting to keep it from being overrun by foreigners who speak a different language and who don't respect our cultural norms and who threaten our way of life is something that has to be respected in a democratic polity and managed, not dismissed with the back of your hand.
I've got Trump derangement syndrome. I shouldn't be your sparring partner here. Look at this. This is scary. He's putting thoroughly incompetent, underqualified people in positions of massive responsibility. There's his tweet, which goes, "To save your country is not breaking the law." That's pretty extreme. And that's coming, right from the president's mouth. I mean, he's openly saying that laws will have to be broken so that the nation can be reinvented in the way that he chooses.
Oh, that would be John McWhorter over there. How you doing, John?
Hi, Glenn. How are you?
I don't know, man. I've been better, but there's no point in complaining. Anybody who's listening to this needs to know that this is the Glenn Show. I'm Glenn Loury. I teach at Brown University, and I'm talking to my biweekly conversation partner, John McWhorter, who teaches at Columbia University. John also writes a regular column for the New York Times. Congratulations, John, on your most recent column at the New York Times where you talk about Black English and all of that.
Oh, yeah, the James one. Yeah. I enjoyed writing that.
Must have thrown you back to your youth when that issue of Ebonics was raging 25 or 30 years ago.
Yeah, that was what got me started on media commentary, although I didn't know that was what was going on. I just wanted to say my say about the dialect. And one of the things that I remember hearing so often back then and since is there's an idea that Black English was created as a kind of secret code. And it's just something that, it's appealing, the idea that we proactively created something in order not to be heard by the white man. That's often said about Creole languages too. And it's an understandable layman's idea that gets around. There's no actual evidence of that, but it's just it's a clever guess. And I think that the way Everett has the slaves deliberately teaching each other this way to talk because whites like Black people to talk that way. It's very clever, and I really enjoyed the book, but I worried that it might encourage that myth. And I know that Everett isn't saying that Black people made up Black English. I don't think he would. He's somebody who will believe that. But still, because the book is so good and there's going to be a movie, I thought this is going to reinforce the idea that there's something unreal about Black English. And
do you know there's going to be a movie, or you're just assuming?
No, there is one that is being planned. And so, and it'll get around. And you can imagine.
Everett, this is his novel, James, a retelling of Mark Twain's Huckleberry Finn in the voice of Jim, the enslaved person who is friends with Huck Finn. You're saying he's not saying what about Black English?
Well, the kind of street myth is that Black English is something that Black people made up in order to not be understood by whites. That's something that gets around. It's not that there's any evidence of that, but it's just an idea that just gets around. Now, Everett is saying that this slave speech is something just completely made up, not so that white people can't understand it, but because they think that white people prefer that Black people sound uneducated and are using quote unquote broken English. So it's a variation on that old idea. But in both cases, Black English isn't something that emerged organically and is legitimate speech. It's something that people made up. And it also encourages an idea that it's broken English, that people made something up that isn't real language. And the kind of person who'll say plantation mentality, here we are today talking in this way that we made up in order to not be understood by white people, but wasn't real speech. And I just want to make sure that people understand that there's a difference between that book and the movie that it's going to be better known as, in the same way as Everett's other book, the movie
Erasure.
Which?
Isn't it called Erasure, that was made into American fiction?
Right. Erasure is made into American fiction. James is going to be known more from the movie. And I just want people to understand that he has created a very clever idea. It's a novelistic idea, but this can't be taken as a confirmation that Black people made up Black English as a trick, because then it isn't legitimate language. So it was just a kind of a point I wanted to make in the piece. And, it was fun to write too.
So as I read it, I understood him to be lecturing the character James to the young Blacks that you had to be careful. White people are dangerous and they're also insecure. And if they think that you are challenging them in any way, that they are not the ones who are setting the agenda, who are at the control panel in charge of what's going on, the repercussions will be detrimental to you and could be deadly. So this is a matter of life and death as to how you conduct yourself under conditions of domination.
Mm-hmm.
Don't be uppity.
Right.
Don't get ahead of these people, even though you are thinking circles around them, because in fact, these white masters are infantile and predictable and manipulatable, if that's a word, can be manipulated. And language is a critical tool in that endeavor.
Very much.
That's all right to you?
Yeah, that's exactly what they're conveying. And I have never read a book that conveyed more vividly what the terror of being a slave was. I think, we all know the basic facts. It's not true that slavery is kept hidden, that America hasn't acknowledged it. It's acknowledged it a great deal, especially since the 1970s. You've got scholars, including very dedicated white ones, writing very detailed books about slavery. It's no longer America's secret. But you almost get inured to it. You think, well, there were people who were working without pay. There was whipping, but families were separated. But to really feel the terror, some of the scenes in James, at one point, James and his, who was he with at the time? James is with a friend, and the friend looks white, but is very partly Black and therefore is a slave himself. But this other person is posing as white. And they're just walking down the street in a town, and this quote unquote ancient white woman says, "Did he look at me?" And the other guy says, oh no, better not have. Did he just say something to me? Better not have. That sort of thing. That's their whole life. And what she means by better not have is, if that slave was looking at me or addressing me directly, I'm going to get people to beat the hell out of him and maybe kill him. That's what they live under. That's what it would have been like. I don't read enough fiction, and so maybe there's some things I missed, but I hadn't felt it that deeply since my mother made me read Roots back in the 70s. And I don't think Roots, even with some of the maiming in Roots, I don't think it conveyed it as precisely as James. It's a book of terror, really, and the language is part of that. Don't speak standard English. Don't talk like them or you might get killed. I thought that was very well done, even though that's not what it was like linguistically, but still, yeah.
Would you place Percival Everett in the first ranks of African-American writers in the 21st century?
I'm going to honestly say that I don't read enough fiction to have any authority on that. I read 10 novels a year, if that. I like nonfiction better.
10 is a lot, man. 10 novels a year is a lot.
I'm a readaholic, but it's not the first thing I grab. Like, I'm looking up at my shelf. Some of it is actually under this laptop. Let's see. I've got one novel. I've never read The Bluest Eye. I've decided it's time to
Toni Morrison.
The Bluest Eye. I've got The Oldest Living Confederate Widow Tells All by Gurganis, because people talk about it. And if I look up, there is a Trollope novel, because I've been kind of getting into him. That's it. Then there's Evelina by Frances Burney, because somebody told me that Frances Burney was as good as Jane Austen and nobody talks about it. All the rest, like 10 other books, are nonfiction. That's how I read. And this is actually heavy on novels at this point. So anyway, the point being, I don't think I know. I think many people would say Jessamine Ward, but I haven't read one of her books yet. What do you think?
Well, I read novels from time to time. I have a little book club with my sons, Glenn II and Nehemiah. And, every month or two, there will be a book that we'll read together and then discuss. We may have video conferences. Nehemiah lives in San Francisco. Glenn lives outside of Boston. And the last one was called Babel by a Chinese American writer whose name escapes me at the moment. But the book is vivid in my mind. It's set in England in the Victorian era, the 1830s, 1840s, late 30s, early 40s, during the Opium War period when the Brits or colonialists are trying to impose the opium trade on the Chinese and they're encountering resistance. And it's at a language institute at Oxford where translators are being trained. And there's a cadre of young non-Brits, they're from South Asia, they're from China, they're from Africa, Caribbean, and they're brilliant young people who are being trained in the art of translation so that they can be aids to the business interest and militarist on the British imperial side as they negotiate with the locals. They come out and they go to the meetings and they whisper in the ear of the British masters and render the British response to the locals in the local dialect, and they're being trained to do this. Anyway, long story short, they form a underground rebellion against the empire. In the novel, they resist. They become kind of revolutionaries. They have a secret society. It's very intricate, very well done. The characters are beautifully rendered, and the themes are, well, they could be to a certain degree relevant to contemporary times. Anyway, I enjoyed it.
Yeah. Fiction is, I once knew a very wise person who said, the thing about the classics is they're good. And she was right. There's a reason why most of the classics are good, and there are a lot of really good modern novels out there. And I wish I read more. It's interesting when people talk about writing, a writing workshop, the art of writing. It's just like if you say, does somebody drink, you mean alcohol. Writing is supposed to be fiction. The idea that nonfiction books are writing too is thought of as kind of ancillary. It's people cherish fiction, and most readers cherish fiction more than I really do. And it's a shame because I shouldn't say cherish, I should say seek. Because once I'm in the book, I generally am really enjoying it. But then the next thing, I want to read about biology or something like that. Yeah, I try to work against that.
Excuse me for interrupting. Do you watch TV?
I do. It's funny what watching TV is these days, though. I do not sit down in a chair and look at a screen anymore. I watch TV on my stationary bike, and I watch TV in bed looking at my phone, usually. But yes, I do try to follow TV, and I think of it as a kind of reading in a way.
Yeah, I find myself after dinner sitting with my wife and watching an hour or two, sometimes 3 if it gets really interesting. And, you do that 4 or 5 times a week, and that adds up to a lot of books that haven't been read. I have the trade-off problem, but
there's a lot of really good stuff on TV these days, though. For somebody today to say, I don't watch TV, in a way, they're saying I don't read books, because a lot of what's on TV is now better than what most movies were 30 years ago. And then there's the trash, which can be fun too.
We just rewatched the 4 seasons of Succession. And it was really, really good. We were struck by how fucking good it was. And, almost Shakespearean in the drama, the scenes, the production, the dialogue, the costuming, everything. It was just very beautifully
the weirdest show
done.
Yeah, it was weird, especially considering how little it was about. It's really just, who's going to take over this company? And they just grind on and on. They quit while they were ahead. I'm glad they didn't feel like they had to do 8 seasons. They did exactly what they needed to do. But yeah, spectacular television.
John, the weight of the world is on my shoulders as I ease toward stepping away and becoming an emeritus professor here at Brown. It's such a big transition in my life. I'm teaching this class, my freshman seminar on race and inequality. The kids are brilliant and eager and, challenging and lovable. And, I know I'm going to miss them. Yeah.
It would be hard to leave that behind. Yeah, definitely. I'm thoroughly enjoying not having to teach for this whole year. It's been really refreshing, and I am so happy that this is my arrangement with Columbia, but I would not want to go into next fall doing the same thing. I'm going to miss it all by then. Yeah. They keep you on your toes, especially the really gifted.
Like it or not, the news we consume profoundly shapes how we see the world. With countless agendas competing for our attention, having the right tools to uncover bias, break free from big tech algorithms, and escape echo chambers has never been more important. That's where Ground News comes in. It's the website and app I rely on daily to stay informed, cut through the noise, and get closer to the truth. Visit ground.news/Glenn Show to see for yourself how it works. My favorite feature of Ground News is the Blind Spot feed. It shows you stories that are disproportionately reported by either the left or the right. I find it really helpful for gaining a balanced perspective in our hyper-polarized world. To show you what I mean, here's a story that's been predictably ignored by the left. Kamala Harris signs on with Hollywood Talent Agency. And here's one ignored by the right. ICE prosecutor runs white supremacist account. For both of these and for every story, Ground News gives you a breakdown of the sources covering it, the bias of the media outlets reporting across the left, center, and right, how reliable those sources have been in the past, and who owns them. This is the kind of news analysis you won't find anywhere else. Right now, my viewers can get 40% off the Unlimited Access Vantage plan, which is the same plan I use. Make sure you subscribe using my link at ground.news/Glenn Show. Click the link in the description or scan the QR code when signing up. That's ground.news/Glenn Show. So, my friend, I have to ask you, what are you making of this new political dispensation that we're living through? They're moving fast and breaking things all over the place, and it's hard to keep track of everything that's going on. It's only been a month less than a month as we speak here, that Trump has been in office. Elon Musk and the DOGE insurgency, I don't know what you want to call it, but it's definitely shaking things up. All of the controversial cabinet appointees like Tulsi Gabbard or Pete Hegseth or RFK Jr. have been confirmed as we speak and are assuming the helm in the departments. My friends here in New England are pulling their hair. We just had dinner with a good friend the other night, and all she wanted to talk about was the sky is falling, and I can imagine in your circles in New York City, a similar consternation and maybe even a bit of panic is afoot. I don't know. I'm asking.
Yeah, in my circles, there is a great deal of panic. I'll try this. I've got Trump derangement syndrome. I shouldn't be your sparring partner here. Look at this. I mean, frankly, I have a hard time feeling like my problem with the idea of this man at the helm of this country was me getting my knickers in a twist. I mean, this is scary. He's putting thoroughly incompetent, underqualified people in positions of massive responsibility. There's his tweet, I believe, yesterday, which goes along the lines of, what is it? To save your country is not breaking the law. That's pretty extreme. And that's coming, right from the president's mouth. This is him tweeting this out. And so he's openly saying that, laws will have to be broken so that the nation can be reinvented in the way that he chooses. And honestly, I wrote my Times piece saying that DEI, as we've known it since 2020, did need to go. They're going further than that. And this is a note I don't often strike, but they are sanctioning and letting pass a kind of actual verging on bigotry and intolerance of difference from whiteness and white maleness, but especially just whiteness, which even I worry about. The presidential office is supposed to set a certain example in tone. It can only have so much of an effect, but it's supposed to reflect what the best in us can be. And the implication that we need to go back to the way we viewed normalness in roughly 1960, and that's really what seems to be going on. Let's get rid of all this shit and just go back to what we all know is real, is depressing. And I don't think that it's a matter of we're going to go back to Jim Crow or anything like that. But this is not ideal, what these people are promulgating. And then there's just the rank incompetence. And so we're going to get rid of the fraud, but they can't really identify any real fraud. We're going to get rid of this deep state. We've all wanted to know what that was. Now they're trying to do it. And the thing with Musk is, whatever his style, whatever his 13th, illegitimate child or whatever, he's not identifying any real fraud. This is all absurd. It's boys in a sandbox. I'm really disappointed. It's the worst situation I've known in my adult life. And I remember being one of the people who was saying that about GW during roughly the Iraq War. This is the worst it's ever been, which it was from the perspective of my lifetime, because I was just a kid during Watergate. But this is horrible. This is absolutely horrible. Our country is being run. I'm not going to call him a name, but this isn't right. It's not right.
Yeah, I don't share your foreboding and alarm to the same degree anyway. I mean, I agree that there's some shaky stuff that's going on, and we'll see how these people do. Pete Hegseth as Secretary of Defense, he was at a security conference making pronouncements about Ukraine. I mean, he sounded okay from what I heard. I mean, he wasn't babbling or anything like that. I heard J.D. Vance in Munich giving a speech, and I thought it was a very effective speech. I mean, again, there are things that one could, and I'm sure you would disagree with about U.S.-European relations, but J.D. Vance sounded pretty competent in his exposition of their point of view. DOGE is going through the bureaucracy. There is a lot of waste, fraud, and abuse in there to be rooted out, and you're not going to root it out with patting people on the back and whatnot. You're going to have to break some eggs. You're going to have to move fast and break things. I'm willing to give them, I'll give them 6 months and see how it shakes out. But that's just me. I'm so repulsed by what I take to be the corruption of the incumbent regime, the establishment regime around the issues of censorship, for example, around this diversity stuff, which was over the top. People overplayed their hands. I've said that here before. We're experiencing a backlash. Yeah, there's a lot of, pro-white, quote unquote, sentiment in the anti-DEI thing, but then there was discrimination against white people. There was, in the spirit of the DEI, So I'm prepared to wait and see how it shakes out. The people did vote pretty definitively. It wasn't a landslide, but it was a very convincing victory in that election. And, we're going to see.
Let's try this one, for example. This business of mass deportations, with the idea that you're getting rid of a criminal element. Now, I've even said this on the show before, and I'll say it again. I wasn't aware that there was a disproportionate number of crazy and criminal people coming over the border. Of course, there'll be some, but the idea that is most, or even say some significant proportion of Latino immigrants coming over the border, I've never seen the case made. Now, if what was going on was really that the Trump administration was making a greater effort than the Biden administration to get rid of criminal immigrants. Okay, but there seems to be kind of an overreach in on top of, which means that you can't help seeing it as motivated in part, at least, but if it is a part, it's a large one, of just wanting to get all these Latinos out of here because they're not legal and they shouldn't have come unless they were legal. And really, we kind of want to get rid of these people. You can't help wondering if it was Norwegians who had come in the same numbers, including the same proportion of criminals, whether they would want to eliminate them. But the other thing is, to watch yesterday, or was it Friday? Yes, Friday. What happened with Mayor Eric Adams, Mayor of New York City, Eric Adams, where the administration is transparently dropping charges against him that are clearly legitimate. He is a corrupt, not to mention inept mayor. He has not turned out well. And to see him actually on television with Tom Homans actually, baiting him, saying, if you don't do what we say, and he actually, says he's going to have his foot up his ass, kind of laughing, but the sight of that and the fact that Homans is rather large and Adams is rather small, and there he is, black on TV, smiling in that big way, putting up with that condescension. Basically, they're saying, you help us do this, i.e. get rid of these shuddering, cowering Latino people, most of whom didn't do anything wrong except come here without papers, but they're not hurting anything while they're here. You're going to help us do that, and we're going to pardon you for crimes. This is the way things go, and this is openly said on TV. This is just the way it goes. I understand what you mean about breaking shit. There's a little part of me that watches all this and thinks, well, all right, but suppose it works. Suppose most of this ends up creating good. But I don't think it's going to when we see some of these things. What I saw was just, we're going to get all these Latinos out, and we're going to pardon you if you help us do it, little black man. I don't like it.
Man, what did the Latinos in Texas who voted for Trump want? You think they wanted more unauthorized entry into the country of people who were not legal, who could go to the appropriate border crossing place and submit themselves to the process of vetting for an asylum claim, but who instead chose to cross the Rio Grande at a convenient place and come into the country illegally? Anti-Latino, I mean, the idea that you would ask people, you want to come into our country, you do it by the processes that we have established for that purpose. And if you don't, you're breaking our laws, and we're going to deal with you by deporting you from our country. I don't see what's wrong with that at all. I mean, in fact, I'm not sure you're serious about enforcing your immigration laws if you don't deport people who break them. So if I get here, I'm here for good, and deporting me is an anti-Latino move. That's a posture that invites all the world to come into the country without authorization. So you're either serious about enforcing the immigration laws or you're not. You break the laws, there are consequences. And among those consequences are deportation if you don't have legal authorization to be in the country in the first place. Full stop. What's wrong with that?
Of course, what you just said would get you kicked out of most faculty lounges. I don't hear it that way. I know what you mean. Why couldn't they have just waited their turn? Why do they have to, be dragged across a river and come in and hide from the cops and live in abject poverty? And what happens if their kids get sick? How come they couldn't just come through?
And what has their being Latino got to do with anything?
I get that. And then the question, though, is, why did they come illegally? Why did they do that? Is it because they're scamps? Is it because they're criminals? Or is it because they were so desperate that they didn't want to wait the 2 years that it would have taken to do it in the legal manner? And so maybe we need to change our immigration procedures so that people who are desperate, I mean, imagine you probably have kids and you can't make a living, or there are people who want to kill you because you're on the wrong side of something in between those two things. You're desperate. And you're supposed to wait at the border for 2 years while people take care of your papers. I get why people would do it illegally. There must be a reason, in other words. It's not that these people are all unreasonable and naughty. And so apparently there's a reason why you would do that. And so the solution is therefore, well, you didn't do it legally, and so we're just going to put you back there where you can't make a living, where you might starve, where you might be killed. Not to mention, of course, the temptation of the wealth here. And most of these people, from what I see, from what I hear, The idea is to give their children a better life that they never had, and they're only going to get so far. Do they deserve to be sent home? I'm not sure I understand why that's so urgent. Is our social system about to break? Why that? Why not fix things here? Why not do things that we need done here? Kind of like back in the day, I remember being a kid and listening to some people, including my mother, saying, why are they spending all that money getting us to the moon? What's all this astronaut stuff when people are dying in the ghettos, as people used to say? There was something to that. Why do we have to do that? I was always a little perplexed by it myself. Astronaut, we're here on the moon. So what about fixing Detroit? Well, same thing here. Why get rid of all these people? Go ahead.
Remember the Last Poets? I think it's the Last Poets. It might be Gil Scott-Heron. Rat done bit my sister Nell, and Whitey's on the moon. Her arms and legs begin to swell, and Whitey's on the moon. And it goes on in that vein.
I never knew that. That. And so now it's Pedro's got to go. And in the meantime, the climate is going to hell slow.
What do you say? What do you say to the observation that this is exactly what Donald J. Trump ran on in running for president? He didn't make any secret out of his desire to reverse the lax immigration policies of the Biden administration. He wants to build a wall. They were trying to sell off parts of the wall, et cetera, et cetera. He's not saying most immigrants are criminals, but he's saying some of them are and some of them are. And he's pointing to victims of their criminality and saying no American should have to experience that. And he ran on that and he won. So he's not doing anything that the American people, through their political institutions, haven't endorsed. What do you say to that?
Well, frankly, there are many Latinos I know who came the legal way. And the way they feel about this is, the ones who came in illegally, we don't like that either. How come they can't do what we did? And I'm not sure how informed that is in terms of figuring out the difference between somebody whose parents came here from Mexican parents came here legally several decades ago versus somebody who's trying to escape oblivion in Honduras today. There are differences, but still, I understand that part. And yes, Trump did run on this. And many Latinos thought, well, he doesn't mean me, which is reasonable. But still, I would say that the person who ran on that shouldn't have won. Because, now this is an important nuance.
But he
didn't say that all Mexicans are rapists. He didn't say that. He said they send us their rapists and there's something else, I think criminals. So there are rapists and criminals among them and they send them to us. That implies that the ones that we see here, there's something wrong with the ones that we see here. He ran on that, although that particular statement was a long time ago, but I don't think he would disavow it now. And no, the person who said that shouldn't have won, in my view, because the person should have won who had other priorities in mind rather than playing upon the xenophobia that is natural to us as human beings and playing upon it because he clearly feels it himself and is of the opinion that he should not be shut up about it. We shouldn't be ashamed of it. Now, he's not going to put it that way, partly because he wouldn't be capable of the objectivity of looking at it that way and putting the words together. But that's what this is. No?
Yeah. John and I often talk about higher education on this podcast, obviously. That's the universe we both inhabit. And why not? It's a topic that has moved front and center of late at both the state and national level. Free speech on campus, viewpoint diversity on campus, cancel culture on campus, soaring tuition, affirmative action, race-based admissions, accreditation, the erosion of standards, attacks on the classics, hiring litmus tests, critical race theory, diversity, equity, and inclusion, you name it, it's in the news. So, with all that's going on, and there's a lot going on, to whom can one turn as a trusted resource of all issues related to campus reform, whether you're a student, faculty, trustee, administrator, donor, policymaker, or alumni? One source we want you to know about and strongly recommend as a credible and respected voice on all these issues is the American Council of Trustees and Alumni, or ACTA, whom we're pleased to have supporting this episode. ACTA is on the front lines, promoting academic excellence, academic freedom, and accountability at America's colleges and universities. They don't just serve as trusted advisors to college trustees and alumni, they help arm reformers with resources, ideas, recommendations, information, even grassroots alumni support through their Campus Freedom Initiative. They make positive changes happen, and they approach these issues in a nonpartisan, balanced, informed, highly credible way, which we appreciate. If you care deeply about these issues, as John and I do, you really must know more about the American Council of Trustees and Alumni. Start by looking them up on the web at goacta.org. That's goacta.org. And follow them on Twitter and Facebook. Now, this is a part of a larger thing. I was looking at Tucker Carlson's interview of Viktor Orban, the Hungarian prime minister, the other day. And Orban was, of course, talking about the implications of the new political dispensation in America for Europe, and was extolling the virtues of a rising respect for borders. And of course, Hungary's giving its geographic location there in Europe. Eastern Europe is one of the countries where the migrant issue has arisen, and where he's been very strenuous in, keeping people out of Hungary who they don't want in. So he felt to some degree affirmed by the drift of policy in America. And I think this is an issue that you're going to see. You're seeing it throughout the European Union and in the United Kingdom of reactions against. And I think it's in that's defense of the nation state, a kind of populist pushback against the laxity of the governing elites in these respective countries regarding who comes in, and the preservation of our, quote unquote, our way of life, our culture, and so on. That's how I see it. I see it in a larger context, and I see it as a continuation of a drift in the West that I associate with Brexit, where the popular sentiment in the United Kingdom was to leave the European Union, and we're seeing some of that here in the United States. And there had better be a better answer from you guys to this sentiment in these various polities than "you are racist," because loving my country and wanting to keep it from being overrun by foreigners who speak a different language and who don't respect our cultural norms and who threaten our way of life is something that has to be respected in a democratic polity and managed, not dismissed with the back of your hand.
I hear you. I hear you completely. And, I'm going to get in trouble for this, but it's as usual with anything like that. I think a lot of reasonable people are thinking it. When I read about Europe, and you read about the sort of thing that happens in some Western European country or England, it seems to be by the week, where a Muslim immigrant, or sometimes child of Muslim immigrants, does something really awful. And so Munich, just a few days ago, an Afghan ends up driving into a crowd of people. And that's a kind of crime that you can't really stop. And the idea is that this person has the same beef that goes back to what we suffered in New York 9/11, the West against Islam. And they feel that their job is to kill people in the name of what the West has done. I can imagine I know some Germans in particular who feel it's time to stop letting people in who are Muslim, because there's the chance that especially one of the men is going to harbor that kind of view and kill people. Not to mention what I hear also too often, for it not to be a general trend, it is real, that if you have different views of the place of women in society based on either your religion or your culture, A lot of young men in those countries make life very difficult for the native women. I have an idea that that's something women are just supposed to tolerate. I've heard that from too many German women for it not to be true, and you read about it all the time. Now, of course, there are white men who behave the same way, but there's a disproportion apparently in terms of the Muslim men. And this goes back even to the 70s and 80s with Turks in Germany. I've read about it, and I remember hearing about it back when I was in college from some German people I knew who did not seem to me to be bigots. They were just talking about a reality. Yeah, the idea that the country is that's going to be the majority of the population when these are people who have different values. Yeah, I get that. But is that the issue here? I mean, are the people coming from Latin America?
Well, maybe the issue in Hungary, but it may not so much the issue here in the United States.
Here, when the Latinos come, they basically become us. Generally, in two generations, their children speak English and listen to the same music everybody else does. And I'd say this too much on this show, but in the neighborhood I live in, I see this. I don't see these Spanish-speaking people as some invading horde who are going to change America. I mean, America has become more like them to an extent in terms of their music and their food, but it's all really pretty much okay. And yes, there's the occasional criminal. One of them burned a woman alive on the subway a month ago. Yeah, he was insane. That was just one person. So I feel like, I hate saying this, I feel like what Hungary has been defending itself against, and I'm not an Orban fan, but saying we're not letting anybody in. Maybe it's a little overdone, but what they're afraid of is different from somebody coming from Honduras with their two kids and, opening up a little stall on the street. Do you see what I mean? I don't feel the danger here that there unfortunately seems to be in Sweden or in Germany, etc.
Yeah, I agree with that. I don't think the danger is anything near the same to threat to our, quote, way of life and our culture. I suppose it could be down the road, but if you had millions coming across unauthorized for a decade, if you had, in effect, Kamala Harris had won the election and the pre-existing policies had been reaffirmed, I think you could get to that. But I want to change the subject.
Glenn, I just want to insert very quickly.
Yeah, sure.
This is the analogy. What was it? 10 and change years ago, when there were those two brothers who killed people in the Boston Marathon, the Tsarnaev brothers.
Yeah.
Muslim, Caucasus Muslim.
Yeah.
And they did that in the name of Islam. And in a very abstract way, it's not that anybody was hurting them, but the big brother was kind of a thug and thought it was his duty, and he seduced the little brother into joining him in doing it. And if you follow the little one, Johar, and you read his text messages and things, all of it is done with a kind of a swagger. It's part of, being a teenager. He was kind of getting off on it until he was caught and ended up spending the rest of his life in prison. And the older one ended up dying in a raid when they were caught. Imagine if most of our immigrants, I hate to say it, but most of our immigrants weren't Latinos, but most of our immigrants were from Muslim countries. Now, of course, it would hardly be that anything like every one of them was going to do this. Might be some tiny number. But if the Tsarnaev brothers were typical, if we had millions and millions and millions of families producing brothers like that, how would we feel about immigration? Then I would understand. I hate to say it. But the Latinos are not animated by that animus that the Tsarnaev brothers were dealing with. Anyway, I just wanted to say that.
Yeah, no, you're making a point, and I get it. I see what you're saying. There are foreigners threatening our way of life, and then there are foreigners threatening our way of life. We're not in the latter condition. So a point taken. No, I wanted you follow popular culture. Did you watch the Super Bowl, John?
I have my sports thing where, I have never seen a Super Bowl. I've never sat down in front of one. This year, I knew that one of the teams, I'm not
from your hometown of Philadelphia, bro,
was the Eagles. I knew that, but I honestly cannot tell you now who the other team was. I have never seen.
Man, that's funny. That's really hilarious. The other team was the repeat twice Super Bowl champion Kansas City Chiefs, led by Patrick Mahomes, the storied quarterback.
Is that how you say that name?
Patrick Mahomes.
I've been seeing it and thinking it was Mahomes. Oh, okay, Mahomes.
No, it's Mahomes. And his tight end, Travis Kelce, who is the beau
of Taylor Swift. Right.
Yeah, Taylor Swift, et cetera. But no, I know you don't follow the game, but the halftime show was Kendrick Lamar, and you do follow music and pop culture. So what have you heard, if you didn't see, of that halftime show? And can you explain to me the beef, quote unquote beef, between Lamar and Drake, the Canadian rapper, and what are rap beefs really about? And why does anybody give an FUCK about whether or not these guys like each other? And apparently they diss. That's actually a term of art now. They diss one another in their respective tracks. And Lamar's "Not Like Us," which he performed during the halftime show, was a masterful diss. Of, I don't even get it, man. I'm out of it. I don't understand. Help me.
I'm not really much better than you on these sorts of things. I wrote a book about rap in 2007, and because I get obsessed with things, I listen to an awful lot of music, awful lot. I really listen closely. I listen to a good 200 CDs. That's a lot. And frankly, it blew a gasket. After that, I couldn't listen to rap anymore, even the good stuff. I just got tired of listening to black men bragging to a beat. I just, all Mozart sounds the same, sort of. I know, folks, believe me, I know that's not true. But all Mozart kind of sounds the same. To me, it's rap. It's just, okay, got it, guys, got it. And so I haven't paid that much attention. I remember somebody telling me in about 2011 that Kendrick Lamar was amazing. And I said, yeah, I'm going to listen to that. And frankly, I never have. But I know that the beef thing, in the old days, the beef thing often led to actual violence with guys shooting each other outside of radio stations and things like that. And with all of them, all but admitting in moments of candor that it was all just designed to sell albums. With Lamar and Drake, I don't know what their real intent is, but the idea is that Lamar claims that Drake isn't really black because he's Canadian and he's light-skinned and who he dates, et cetera. And that's been taken as a culturally interesting thing to say to Drake. And so they don't like each other. But there's none of the guns. We really are in a different era. Whatever their beef is, none of us are afraid that anybody's going to get shot at the Grammys or anything like that. The teen pregnancy, way, way down. That sort of thing is now another era. 50 Cent is, that's over. But there's that. I think the takeaway, and I have never seen a Super Bowl halftime show, but I, of course, read about it the next week. And the idea is that this kind of rap is now so default that would be the halftime show instead of whatever the halftime show was 20 years ago. And I've seen a lot of complaints, all this music that almost nobody's ever heard of, and that's the halftime show, some people are saying. But no, enough people have heard of it. Enough people do follow Kendrick Lamar that it was really something that he would bring, that would be the Super Bowl halftime show that people could relate to. And apparently he soft pedaled a particular line against Drake somewhat for a while, and then kind of came out with it, but that clearly wasn't his main point. What was interesting is that this is conscious rap. There was a time 20 years ago, there was the real rap, which is guns and I'm gonna kill you, and then there's this conscious rap where you're trying to make some interesting points, and that was special. Kanye West, the idiot that he is now, surprising, he was considered the conscious rapper. Now that topic, that classification is gone. Just like you don't talk about interracial couples, that's kind of an archaic term because it's now just so ordinary. Now you don't talk about who the conscious rappers like Common and Talib Kweli and Kanye West are. Conscious is now what rap is. And so that was part of the halftime show. Nothing could make it clearer that rap, hip hop is now American music. I'm sure it was a great show, but frankly, I think I was reading a book, and I'm not trying to be a snob about it. I can tell how satisfying it is to follow sports. Like you're in the bar, you've got all these statistics, you can bond with, any man, a cab driver wants to talk to you about. I get it. For me, though, that's, I'm prissy. For me, I get that from the theater. I don't do it with sports. But no, I think that was an important halftime show. But I must admit, I didn't see it.
Now, Lamar has been awarded a Pulitzer Prize for his lyrics, has he not?
I've heard that, yeah.
What makes him a great writer? I mean, I'm naive here. I'm really literally asking because I don't get it.
Glenn, to be honest, I don't think I have experienced anything by him except that my daughter played me Not Like Us the other night, and I listened. But I know that a lot of rap lyrics, especially by the ones that would have been called conscious back in the day, or Jay-Z, if you go through the volume of his lyrics, it's poetry. It's today's poetry. It doesn't rhyme as closely as traditionally we were taught poetry is supposed to, but not all poetry worldwide rhymes in the same way. And if you want to see a vivid manipulation of street speech and referring to popular culture in ways that are going to be a useful encyclopedia in the future, then what's going on deserves recognition as today's poetry. We kind of think that it's so quaint when grandpa can recite Invictus, or, grandma remembers, well, now it's great grandma, remembers memorizing Edna St. Vincent Millay in school. Oh, what happened to that? Nothing. Nowadays, kids have more poetry in their heads, I think, than great grandpa and great grandma. It's just that it's to a beat. It's these rap lyrics. And despite the fact that the genre wears me out, I get how artistic it can be. So Lamar, I don't know, but I'm guessing that it's the same vein as Jay-Z, which I have engaged the volume of. It's good stuff. So was Tupac. He was another one where I dug in deep because I listened to everything of his because I wrote an article in the New Republic about rap, which was never printed because hip hop lyrics are very hard to get the rights to. And so I had to give up. But that piece, it's probably floating around online. I was reviewing Michael Eric Dyson's study of Tupac. And that stuff is good. I got tired of it, but he was a poet. He really was. It's a rather narrow palette sometimes, but that's true of most poets. So,
okay. What do you make of the latest Kanye controversy where he said he liked Hitler?
He is a clown.
And I thought he's trolling you guys. He's messing with you. I mean, I don't know what he thinks about Hitler. He likes him or he doesn't like him. But the only reason he said that is to get a response from you and have everybody talking about him.
He's a child. I mean, that's it. He's a child. And what's bizarre is how good his music is. I think he was my favorite of all the rap that I heard. I really love the way he would put stuff together. There's a genius there. But he's also a fucking idiot. And all this stuff he's saying is because he knows it's going to make people mad. I remember there was a kid in school when I was 9, and he was this little guy. I'm in Montessori school. He was a black guy from what you might call the other side of the tracks. And this school was dedicated to bringing in some kids like that. And he didn't work out because he was just recreationally violent. One day he threw a brick at somebody's head and they had to expel him. And I asked my mother, what's wrong with Benji? And she said he likes negative attention. And by the way, the person whose head he threw the brick at was me. He could have left me cognitively impaired if I had not happened to move, because I caught him doing it and I moved away. And so that's Kanye. He just wants to get a rise out of people. Walking in with his wife, literally naked, essentially. That's the idea, is to get attention, and that's all. He's an ape. And he doesn't deserve the attention that he gets. He's just spewing shit. I wonder if there isn't something wrong with him. He's not autistic. I mean, frankly, that's what he has said last week. But, autistic men, if he's significantly autistic, you don't marry twice. If you're significantly autistic, you cannot. I doubt that the autistic person could produce the kinds of albums that he did, although maybe I'm getting the nature of the condition wrong. He's not autistic. What he is, he's an asshole. So he's a famous asshole. So he needs to stop getting attention for all these things that he does.
All right. I say we call it a day here, John. I want people to know that they can submit questions for John and I to consider if they become paying subscribers at glennlowry.substack.com. And John, you and I need to address ourselves to the questions submitted for the month of February soon, perhaps in a week or so, and we'll post that before the month is out.
That's right.
But thanks for your attention. Thank you, John, for your interesting observations about our contemporary issues. So,
I don't know how interesting they were, but a pleasure as always.
Take care, my friend.
You too.